Imagine this. You and your friends hatch the perfect murder scheme. You know the victim, an old man, drunk most of the time, barely hanging on. You even take out life insurance, certain you'll cash in within days. But what happens when no matter what you do, no matter how many times you poison, freeze, starve, or beat him, he just keeps surviving? This isn't a horror movie. This isn't urban legend. This is the real story of Michael Malloy, the man the press called the Rasputin of the Bronx and Iron Mike. Because no matter how many times his so-called friends tried to kill him, he just simply wouldn't die. Buckle up, because this is one of the strangest, darkest, and most bizarre true crime stories in American history. Let's set the stage. It's the early 1930s in New York City. The country is deep in the Great Depression. Jobs are scarce, poverty is everywhere, and the speakeasies are alive with desperate men drowning their sorrows. Among them is Michael Malloy, an Irish immigrant, probably in his 50s or 60s. Now, little is known about his early life, and some reports say he was once a firefighter. Others say he was a laborer, but by the 1930s, he was a homeless alcoholic, wandering the Bronx and relying on local bars and the occasional odd job to get by. Now, to the regulars, Malloy was just another down-and-out drunk, a harmless figure always looking for his next drink. But to five men, Tony Marino, Joseph Murphy, Francis Pasqua, Hershey Green, and Daniel Kreisberg, Michael Malloy was an opportunity. Tony Marino owned a speakeasy on East 161st Street, and he was no stranger to shady dealings. In fact, the year before, he allegedly taken out a life insurance policy on a woman who conveniently froze to death in his bedroom. Now, along with his friends, Marino saw Malloy as the next payday, and here's how their plan worked. They convinced Malloy to sign multiple life insurance policies, naming one of the gang members as a beneficiary. The total payout was roughly $3,500, which sounds small today, but was a huge sum during the Great Depression. The scheme was simple. Provide Malloy with an unlimited bar tab so he could drink himself to death. They assumed that his alcoholism would do the work for them. So the gang started by giving Malloy all the alcohol he wanted, for free. Day after day, night after night, they poured him whiskey, gin, and even wood alcohol. Pure industrial grade alcohol, not even meant for human consumption. But Malloy kept coming back. In fact, according to witnesses, Malloy drank with enthusiasm. He would pass out on the floor only to wake up the next day, brush himself off, and ask for another round. This wasn't just stubbornness. By any normal standard, Malloy should have been dead. Wood alcohol causes blindness, organ failure, yet Michael Malloy seemed unaffected, and the gang grew impatient. They tried escalating. They gave him spoiled sardine sandwiches mixed with broken glass. They served him raw oysters soaked in denatured alcohol. They even tried mixing horse liniment and turpentine into his drinks. But Michael Malloy's reaction? He smiled, he drank, and he lived. By this point, the gang started to get desperate, so they turned to the brutal New York winter. One freezing night, they waited until Malloy passed out drunk. They dragged his limp body to a park bench, poured ice-cold water on his bare chest, and left him outside. Temperatures were well below freezing, and by morning, they were sure he was to be found frozen solid. Instead, hours later, Malloy stumbled back into the bar, shivering, complaining about the cold, asking for another drink. The gang realized they needed a more violent approach, so they recruited a cab driver, Harry Green, to run Malloy down with his taxi. One night after Michael Malloy passed out, they popped him up on a street, and Green floored the gas and hit Malloy at 45 miles per hour. Malloy was thrown into the air, landing hard on the pavement. The gang assumed he was dead, They even went looking for his body in the hospital and the morgue. But 5 days later, Malloy walked back into the bar, battered, bruised, with a fractured skull, broken bones, but alive. Finally, after all their failed attempts, the gang turned to a simple but deadly method: gas. On February 22, 1933, they waited until Michael Malloy passed out drunk. They carried him into a rented room, placed a hose from a gas lamp into his mouth, and turned on the gas. This time, Michael Malloy didn't survive. With Malloy finally dead, the gang filed their life insurance claims. But their celebration was short-lived. Insurance companies, suspicious of the multiple policies and strange circumstances, started to investigate, and the gang members, drunk on their perceived success, couldn't stop bragging. Before long, police were tipped off. An investigation uncovered the entire plot, and the press dubbed the case the Murder Trust. To prove the death to the insurance companies, a corrupt doctor named Frank Manzella created a fake death for the gang, showing that Michael had died of pneumonia. After proof of Michael Malloy's death, the Murder Trust collected an $800 policy from one of the insurance companies, but couldn't get the other two policies from Prudential. Prudential stated they needed to produce a body for them to sign off on, but Pasqua said they already buried the body. Their insurance companies found that it was strange Pasqua and not Joseph Murphy, who claimed to be Michael Malloy's brother, was coming to collect the check, so investigators looked into it and found that Joseph was actually in jail. This began to raise red flags, and the incredible story of Michael Malloy started to circulate like wildfire in the city. Eventually, Harry Green and the corrupt doctor confessed to their part in the crime. After their confessions, everything pointed back to the original men who devised the plan: Tony Marino, Francis Pasqua, Daniel Kreisberg, and Joseph Murphy. In May of 1933, Michael's body was exhumed for an official autopsy, and his actual cause of death was confirmed. Francis Pasqua, Tony Marino, Daniel Kreisberg, and Joseph Murphy were all convicted of first-degree murder and put to death by electric chair.